With the rivalry week, we had a interesting set of ACC games, non-conference opponents in some cases, huge rivalries like Virginia Tech, Virginia. Well, that's going to make there's some major shifts in the power rankings. This was the hardest power ranking I did since maybe early in the year when we were really guessing. So tell me what I got right. Tell me what I got wrong. Also, let me know if you think it's worth doing this as we move into basketball season. This will probably be the last one of football season. We'll see. But then could maybe consider a basketball season. Let me know if you'd be interested in that. Also, let me know what you think of this one. So I broke this one into tiers again with color codes, but now I feel a little bit more strident about these tiers. This tier in red are teams I don't think are very good. Florida State, 2 wins, like unfathomably abysmal. I was down on them at the beginning of the year. I thought they were maybe only going to win 8 games and be like the 4th best team in the conference. I had no way to even consider that this was possible. I didn't think that there was a floor like this. So they lost to Florida. Stanford lost to San Jose State. They're very bad. Wake Forest lost to Duke. They're not good. Cal was blown out by SMU. The numbers you see here in parentheses are their win totals. So that's the first of these that's bowl eligible. Virginia really kind of collapsed. They were 4-1 at the start of the year. They finished 1-6, and their only win of those 6 was against a also collapsing Pittsburgh team. So disappointing finish for Tony Elliott. He was off to a good start. That seemed like maybe he had got things going the right direction, but that's not the case. I think Virginia's a tough job. So I don't think those teams are good. And then you got North Carolina. In Mac Brown's final game, they lose to NC State. People love Mac Brown. I was never a huge supporter of his. Didn't necessarily think bringing him back was a great move. He did bring in some talent. It wasn't all bad. They had some decent years, played for an ACC championship. But they're going to be a very interesting job. I don't know. I mean, that's a big state school that's got tons of fans. If they were good, I think they could get the support. At the same time, they'll always be second fiddle to basketball. And with revenue sharing, will they dedicate a much larger share of revenue to men's basketball than schools like Clemson? I think so. You also have to wonder with UNC, are they going to dedicate a lot of that money to women's soccer, women's basketball, which they also care about? Maybe that hurts football. I don't know. Maybe that makes it a less attractive job. I don't know. But that's going to be a really interesting hire in the ACC this offseason. Pittsburgh lost again, so they started 7-0. Then they lost 5 straight, losing to Boston College. I had BC above them last week because I thought BC was better than them, and I thought BC would win, and they did. And then NC State, they were awful at the start of the year. They found a little footing. Then they lost 2, but then they managed to at least beat North Carolina to make a bowl game. None of these teams are good. Pretty much all their wins are against bad competition. And so that's the bottom, more than half of the conference. Not so great. But then you get into, let's call this the middle class. I think these are at least dangerous teams. Virginia Tech got a big rivalry win over Virginia. I think they should really be one of the 5 best teams in this conference almost every year. They've got an unbelievable stadium, a gorgeous campus. They could recruit that Tidewater region. They can recruit North Carolina. They should be decent. 6-6 is disappointing for them, especially with the way it started with losses to Rutgers and Vanderbilt. Obviously, Vanderbilt's not that bad, but Virginia Tech should be better than this. Nonetheless, I would pick Virginia Tech to beat any of those teams below them. So I put them here with 6 wins. Boston College, who just beat Pittsburgh, I don't think they're great, but I thought they did a good job stabilizing after losing quarterback Thomas Castellanos. 7 wins for them is kind of back to their equilibrium. We'll see if they can build on that or if this is just who they are. This next chunk is where it got really difficult. So for some of these teams, you're in the top 7, so you feel good. For others, you're not 1 or 2, so you don't feel so good. Duke, 9 wins. That's great for them. Manny Diaz deserves consideration for Coach of the Year. I mean, they lost so much. They lost their quarterback to Notre Dame and just so much talent. He did an awesome job. 9 wins is really impressive. I thought at one point I had them 16 or 17 in the conference. Probably the most positive surprise in the league. So kudos to them. They did kind of what Clemson did in that they beat up on every team that's not very good, but they lost to every quality team they faced. They lost to Georgia Tech. They lost to SMU. They didn't necessarily win any impressive games, but they got 9 wins one way or the other. So can't really knock that. Clemson, 9 wins. Again, same thing. They played 3 quality opponents. They lost to all of them. And you even look at the talent level. They've got Avion Terrell. They've got Peter Woods. Who else is an elite guy that you think of when you think of Clemson? There's no one like a Travis Etienne or a Trevor Lawrence. I think Bryant Wesco could be a great like T. Higgins type player, but he's not there yet. Same for TJ Moore. He could be, Sammy Watkins kind of player eventually, but he's not where Sammy was as a freshman. So, they're just not quite as talented as they were. Sometimes TJ Parker is a really elite defensive end, but not consistently. Antonio Williams is great, but he's not like a first round draft pick kind of receiver. They're just, they don't have huge holes where you say, man, they have just no talent at this position. They're just not as studly elite. They don't overmatch every opponent. When they played South Carolina, they didn't look way more talented than South Carolina. They had some better playmakers, but by and large, fairly comparable. And their upcoming recruiting class is only 27. So I have a separate video in the South Carolina recap where I go into a lot more detail about some philosophical changes that need to be made. This was a weird week because they lost to their rival at home and only scored 14 points. And then hours later, clinched the ACC title berth. So you're mad, but also you just got a chance out of nowhere to win the conference. So I have Clemson all the way down at 6, but again, not all bad. I think Clemson could change the narrative because here's where they are now. So all their wins except 3 came against teams with a sub 500 record. They beat 500 NC State, 500 Virginia Tech, and they went on the road and beat a collapsing Pittsburgh team, and they needed a game-winning, 50-yard touchdown run from Klubnik to do it. So they beat they went from like SEC killers back in like 2012 and that era to ACC cupcake eaters here, just beating up on bad opponents. They've had 3 good opponents. I'm defining that as teams that are 8-4 or better by the end of the year. They lost to them all. They're really only competitive in one of them, South Carolina. So now they're going to get a chance to right that when they play the SMU. You beat SMU, and I won't say all things are solved, but the narrative definitely shifts. And then they'll have to make some philosophical adjustments to the way they manage their roster and acquire talent. But if you want to dive more into that, go check out my other video in the South Carolina recap. I spend a lot of time diving into the details. Above them is Miami. They did finish 10-2. Again, fairly weak schedule. Who did they really beat? They beat Florida when Florida was playing really poorly. They beat Louisville. That's their best win. So, kudos for, a shootout, close win against them. But they also were very close in a lot of these wins, and they finally started losing, lost to Georgia Tech, where they were just out-physicaled, and then they couldn't stop Syracuse. Syracuse just threw it all over them. So it's a bad pass defense, and they were living on the edge, and they finally started getting burned at the end of the year. So they will not play in the ACC Championship. They have 10 wins. Clemson has 9, but both of their losses are conference losses. The hardest team for me to rank was Georgia Tech. They had a really, really tough schedule. I've got them all the way up at 4th, only 7 wins. But, they played some really tough teams. They played Louisville. They played Notre Dame. They played Georgia. So you got to keep that in context. And right now, they're so physical at the line of scrimmage. I would pick them to beat Miami for sure. They already beat Duke. I would pick them to beat Clemson without a whole lot of hesitation. And then below that, I think it's pretty easy to pick them to win. So, they lost to Syracuse, so they're below Syracuse, but I think it's hard to argue them really much lower than 4. So I think Brent Key has done a absolutely fantastic job with the Yellow Jackets, really making them pretty great at the line of scrimmage. And the scary thing is Haynes King is a redshirt junior, so he can come back. And then they have Aaron Philo, who's a freshman. So those 2 quarterbacks, they're going to have to use NIL to make sure they keep this roster together, but they've got a ton of momentum. Clemson goes to Georgia Tech next year. That's going to be really tough. I think Georgia Tech has a real chance to compete for an ACC championship, depending on how the schedules play out. They're a team that is, from a foundational level, on the upswing, maybe more than anyone else in the conference. So they've got a lot going for them. They've won over a lot of big recruits. Tay Harris, they stole from Clemson by offering more NIL dollars, from what I hear at least. That is, I suppose that's a little bit of hearsay, but that's my understanding of it. Other teams are going to have to catch up. I don't know how Georgia Tech found the donors and the companies to make it happen, but they're building a roster. They're building a program. Brent Key's been a godsend for them. Syracuse has 9 wins. Like, I don't know how that happened. They're solid, but like they lost to Stanford. They kind of came out of nowhere. This season, I figured Fran Brown was doing some good things, but I didn't think it was going to happen this fast. 9 wins. They beat Miami. They actually beat Georgia Tech too. So ranking them at 3 is not that difficult. I think they're really great. And then number 2, and I got to give a ton of credit to Fran Brown, the head coach of Syracuse. I love his whole shtick about, losers don't shower. I just sit in my stench for a day or a night if we lose. So that's become like a whole meme and a whole joke. And then after their win against Miami in the post game, saying, hey, Coach Sweeney, you're welcome, because their win over Miami put Clemson in the ACC Championship in Charlotte. And then Louisville is another team, kind of like Georgia Tech. They only have 8 wins, but their schedule is really tough with Notre Dame, SMU, Miami. So last year they had a really weak ACC schedule. This year the script flips on them. So that's why their win total is a little lower, but I still think they're, they beat Clemson, they beat Georgia Tech, they beat Syracuse. They did lose to Miami, but I think having them at 2 is also very fair. And then at number 1, and I actually put them in their own tier, is SMU. 11 wins, more than anyone else in the conference. They do have that loss to BYU, but A, BYU is good, and also B, they weren't who they were yet. They were shifting around quarterbacks. Their offensive line hadn't gelled. They're favored against Clemson. I think they're a really good team. And if Clemson struggled to stop Lenora Sellers running the ball, it figures that if they can't adjust or change something, they might struggle with Kevin Jennings too. Now, Kevin Jennings isn't quite as big of a dude as Lenora Sellers, so maybe they'll be able to bring him down. He's actually a fairly skinny guy. ESPN has him at 189 versus Lenora Sellers has got like 50 pounds on him. So maybe that's the difference, but he's going to be fast. He's going to be dangerous, and he's probably a better passer than Lenora Sellers. So I think they're really dangerous. Sellers is 6'3", 242. So that's a 53-pound difference. So that helps. Maybe Clemson will actually bring him down. We'll see how good SMU's offensive line really is. So I think Clemson's got every bit as good of a chance as I thought they had against South Carolina, but I think SMU being favored is deserved because I think they're the best team in the conference. So let me know what you thought of these rankings. These were the toughest ones. And also hop in the comments. Let me know what you think of doing some of this for basketball as well. As always, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and like this video. It really helps it grow. So thanks for doing that. Hope you enjoyed this season and you keep coming back for more.